Today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners, who for more than 25 years have successfully delivered interim and permanent leadership talent to transform businesses. To hire the talent you need to enable your business to thrive, visit www.progressotalent.com today. Chris Sharman is transforming journeys and inspiring possibilities across the sports, health and leisure sectors in his role as co-founder and chief marketing officer at Topodium Group. He has spent 10 years as managing director of iKids, specialising in branded play and sports activities for children, families and young people on behalf of clients such as Disney, Thomas Cook, Virgin Active and FitPro, and 7 years as global development director and chief brand officer across the global Challenger Sports Network. He is a Kids and Membership Council representative at UK Active and a mentor for their Active Lab programme, and was instrumental in the introduction of Brazilian soccer schools and soccer tots to the UK, in a role that saw him supporting more than 200 franchisees and 1 million participants in the beautiful game, samba-style. So what's his story? Without further ado, let's get into it. Chris Sharman, good morning. Welcome to the Extrology podcast. Great to have you on as my guest this morning. And I guess, as always, I like to start with Chris Sharman, the early years. So tell me, where did you grow up? How did it all start? What was early life like for you?
Yeah, well, great to be here. And I guess it started little village in East Sussex called Crowborough. I lived there for the first 20 years of my life. I was the middle of three boys. So I was the middle boy syndrome. Little one always copied what the older one did. I always had to be the odd one out. Working family. My dad was a salesperson. So that probably was what gave me the starting point of business, because he always used to go off with his briefcase and I was always intrigued by that. Mum was in retail, but looked after the three of us until we were old enough to fend for ourselves. And then she went back into retail. She was a window dresser by trade and then went back into retail management. So I got a lot of my creative side definitely from her growing up. So yeah, sporty-ish. I was always the fat kid at school, so I was always the one that was put in goal. Education wasn't really my thing. So yeah, it was interesting, growing up. Creative side, I knew from an early age that I just wanted to do things that involved business and selling things and stuff. I remember, primary school, must have been 8 or 9. A friend of mine lived 5 doors down, Nicholas. We used to design comic books. Used to draw them all, used to colour them all in, had a name, can't even remember what the name is now, and used to give them to my dad, who used to go to work, used to photocopy them, and we used to sell them at school. And I was 8, 9, this was primary school, so when I was much younger. So that creative side that my mum always kind of had was, she loved her drawing, she was very creative. I remember all the fancy dress stuff we went to school in, it was always like, wow, where did you get that? Oh, my mum made that. It was brilliant.
Do you remember where the inspiration for that, we kind of, if I look back to my childhood, the Beano or the Dandy or any of those kind of comics might have been the first ones I would have picked up. But do you remember that where the inspiration came from to start
producing? It was definitely the Beano and the Dandy. I remember those exactly like you do. And I just started drawing. And I'm very bad at drawing, but I like the storytelling piece. So Nicholas was a great drawer and I was just great at writing stories. And we used to combine, and that was how we created these little comic books. And, I remember, the Beano, it used to have like a refresher bar sellotape to the front of it when we used to go and buy it from the newsagents. And I was like, we could do that. So I used to go down to the local sweet shop and get some, things, stick them on the front. And then we knew that sold more because everyone wanted the sweet. And then the cartoon, book was almost the byproduct. So yeah, early on, that was primary school, and loved that. But it was, I guess, a combination of the fact that, it's funny looking back, I got an old briefcase that my dad didn't use anymore. And I used to remember walking 5 doors down the lane to Nicholas's house with the briefcase, with all the things that we were, and that was it. And aged 8 or 9, that was the starting point of, I guess, being a bit of an entrepreneur.
And had you mentioned your father was a salesman and he was in business, your mum was in retail, obviously in business as well. But had you had that sort of that steer from them that that understanding around creating something and selling it for a profit that actually, or do you think that was, it's that whole sort of nature nurture thing. Do you think that was just an intuitive, almost instinctive trait that you had deep within you?
I think it was just instinctive.
Yeah.
It was nothing that you were taught. It was just something. I think I've always said that I connect dots. I see things, and then I look at how I could integrate that into what I do. And I think I used to love reading comics, and I was like, well, I could do that. I didn't know how to do it. I saw the fact that there was a refresher bar stuck on the front. I was like, well, I could do that. And I think it was more, I just listen and I watch and I absorb things, and I learned from that, I think, more than anything else. I don't think it was anything necessarily that, my parents kind of steered. I think I just watched what they did. My mum loved the creative side. She could turn anything into anything, and whatever resources were available, she'd turn them into something that looked nice, whether that be cooking, whether that be art and craft when I was a kid, whether that was whatever we had to dress up on for the school play. So I think it was a combination of that and just an intrigue to listen, to absorb things.
And do you think that's an interesting turn of phrase you use there, that I could do that, to look at something and think I could do that? I think for an awful lot of people, they might be more inclined to think, oh, I couldn't do that. That would be, so do you, again, I'm interested in the dynamic around that sense that you had that sense of, well, there are possibilities. I could fulfill it. Again, it seems like it was you encouraged in that regard, or you just felt like it was an inherent part of your nature? I
think it was inherent. And I think, my parents and teachers that I remember going back into my school world were always very open to just letting you get on and do things, try things out. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to get things wrong. That's okay. Just, learn from it and move on and try something else. So for me, that exploration of just trying out different things, connecting dots and understanding what works and doesn't is just something that's never been, no one's ever said don't do it. So therefore, I think I've always just, continued it.
And were they to say, don't do it, how do you respond in that scenario?
I guess if someone said now, I would challenge it probably more, because there's more of a confidence in the fact that, well, I can do it, and I have that ability. And I think that's something that the teams and the people that I work with now it's a massive part of how I encourage them to move forwards. Is it's actually okay to get it wrong. I don't mind it. There is this fear of failure with a lot of businesses where they're really hindered from progressing because there is this fear of just getting it wrong, and that's going to cost us. And staff members of the team that I've worked with before is like, actually, I would never have been asked to do that because of the fear of getting it wrong. And for me, I've said to the team so many times, it's okay to get it wrong. Just don't cock it up a second time in the same way, because that proves that you learned the first time around. And I think that for me is a key piece of advice that I'd give to anyone is, it's okay to get it wrong, and don't beat yourself up over it. And actually you learn so much more from getting it wrong. So I think, I've mucked up many things, but every time if you learn from it, then that's how you grow.
So go back to being a kid. Who were the role models? Who were the posters on the wall, the figures that you looked up to? Who inspired you?
Sporting, predominantly. So I was a Man United fan from the age of about 7 or 8, I think. The story behind that was older brother was a big Liverpool fan. Younger brother, as I said earlier, copied everything that older brother did. And so therefore was a Liverpool fan as well. I therefore couldn't be a Liverpool fan. And I remember there was a game on TV, one day, and they were laughing at, this team was winning and they were happy and so on. I was like, well, who's this team that's not winning? Oh, it's Man United. They're useless. All right, well, I'll support them. So I guess I'm the opposite of a glory supporter, because I was just had to be different to back in the 80s when the Liverpool were winning everything and my brothers were loving life. And ever since the 90s and onwards, we've been all right, apart from the last few years. So sports, I grew up with Brian Robson, the Paul Inces, the Eric Cantonars, going through the Alex Ferguson years and so on. So Man United were my team, hugely passionate about football and sport. I was never a great player, but yeah, they were the ones that, for me, the leaders on the pitch.
And you, sport, as we'll come on to career, but clearly sport has been, or the business of sport, if I could put it in that context, has been integral to so much of what you've done. and certainly the broader leisure industry as well, health, fitness, wellness. Was there a point at which you thought, actually, this might be something I could make a career out of as an industry?
Yeah, I guess for me, the creative writing piece, which I knew was in me when I was younger, that was the starting point of the comics. And then I ran the school newspaper and created that. And that was kind of my secondary school version of the comics that I did at primary school. I always wanted to be a sports journalist. That was my thing. Careers advisor always was like, oh no, you can't go on radio because you've got a lisp. So that's not for you. So I was steered away from I wanted to be a commentator. I wanted to do sports journalism, but I wanted to do it on radio. And that was the thing for me. But I got steered away from that careers centre. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I could do newspaper journalism and, that kind of piece. So that was really much in my mind. Got to 15 and I'd played a bit of sport. Tennis was a game I played quite a bit when I was younger. But at 15, my mum and dad were like, you got to go out and earn some money. So I couldn't go to tennis tournaments that were Saturday and Sunday anymore. What was the job that was going to, get me some money and that? So my mum got me an interview as a party instructor at the local leisure centre, half an hour walk away from where we lived. And I was like, I went, did the interview, got the job and became a party host doing sports parties and bouncy castle parties and swimming parties at the local leisure centre for kids. I started when I was 15 and I was like, I wasn't sure to start off with, but I got into it. I loved it. And I literally never left the industry at that point forwards, never looked back, at the journalism piece, although I still like the writing side of what I do in business. That was the starting point, was that being a party host at the local leisure centre age 15.
Which can't have been easy. So there are some parallels. I worked in my local leisure centre from the age of 16. And I remember, I used to host five-a-side football parties and things like that for kids of a similar age. I think when you're a 15, 16-year-old kid looking after other kids or being responsible for other kids is of itself a huge undertaking and very stressful. It's arguably something that wouldn't naturally come to most, that's a broad sweeping statement, but naturally come to most 15, 16-year-olds. So what did you love about it?
The fact that I could have fun. I think for
and
me,
get paid for it. Though,
I was being paid to jump around on a bouncy castle at 16 years old, and that seems a bit strange, but I could kick around a football with a group of kids and that was fine, and I quite enjoyed it. The other part of leisure life, as I always used to know it, was the social side of the staff and that connectivity between the other party hosts and the lifeguards and the duty managers and the guys and girls that worked in the bar and the restaurant and so on. So that social side was something that was really new to me. I didn't have a big circle of friends at school. As I said, I was the little fat kid, and I had half a dozen friends, and that was it. I wasn't the social butterfly in the school world, but I felt like I belonged a bit more in that working environment with slightly older people. That I was 15, 16. I was clearly one of the youngest, and I just had that connectivity with people that were running the leisure centre and so on. And I think that for me was the starting point of finding myself.
Interesting. So you made the point at that, virtually almost at that age, that actually this might be something I could pursue a career in. So tell me a bit about how did life evolve from that 15-year-old organising parties at the local leisure centre? How did then the career play out from there? Yeah,
so I was just, I guess, a sponge for learning at that stage. I wasn't academic. I didn't like the whole sitting in front of books and the school piece and the exams. It wasn't for me. It was a means to an end as opposed to something I enjoyed. Whereas I would go on as many sports coaching qualification courses as I could. I wanted to absorb information and experience that way. So when there was an opportunity to become a lifeguard, I signed up for it. When I could first do my football qualification age 16, I did it. And anything else. I've got random coaching qualifications from roller hockey to basketball to indoor athletics. And I was just a sponge at that age. I just found that way of learning so much more conducive to me than a standard education.
What do you think you learned from that early experience?
I think a confidence that I could do things, an ability to talk to people and speak around the things that I was passionate about. And for me, I think those coaching qualifications just gave me an experience that I can relate back to. And doing a birthday party for 50 kids and you turn up and you've got 5 minutes to prepare and there's no equipment, you've got one ball, you've got 30, 40, 50 kids, you're on your own. You have to think on your feet. Otherwise, you just fall apart. And a lot of the skills that I think I have now in terms of adapting and being flexible and thinking on my feet and coming up with a solution relatively quickly, I know came back from those early days of just having to, to work very intuitively with a group of kids with no, there was no lesson plans, there was no structure. It was like, here you go look after these kids, go and make sure these parents are happy and give them a good time. It's just like, okay. And you just learn on your feet. And I think that was probably the biggest grounding for me that has helped me in business moving forwards, that ability to adapt and be flexible and come up with quick decisions.
In the face of what is undeniably an extremely demanding audience.
Absolutely. Yeah, because kids, as we know, if they don't like something, they'll tell you.
Yeah, feedback never an issue, right?
Absolutely. That they if they love the game, they'll love you forever. If they don't like the game, they will tell you. They won't be the ones that talk about it behind your back like happens in business. They'll be the ones that give you that instant feedback. And if you get it right, that feedback boosts you. That's something that gives you a lot of confidence. And I think from an early age, that was what gave me the confidence to move forwards, was the fact that people were enjoying what I was delivering, whether that was a fitness class, whether that was a sports coaching, program. And that immediate feedback that's what drives a lot of people forwards.
I think the beauty of that scenario, particularly with children as well, is the feedback is very real, isn't it? It's a very genuine. You see it a lot of the time. There's a lot of emotion that might come with that feedback, in the sense of a beaming smile or a laugh, or clearly kids having fun is infectious. Similarly, if they're not having fun, it's abundantly clear. They don't hide their emotions in quite such the same way as we might learn to as we get older. So I'd imagine that's a great learning in terms of how then you go on to pursue a career, which is all about getting the best for people and getting the best out of people. So tell me, I'm intrigued. Early career, very much in the broadly speaking, in the leisure industry. The thing that really stuck out for me, perhaps somewhat self-indulgently, but I was fascinated by the experience, was if I fast forward to 2005 and you become head of business development for ICFDS, I think as they were referred, which is the parent organisation for Brazilian soccer schools and soccer tots. So I think if my research was correct, 200 franchisees, 1 million participants globally, but with a heck of a vision, I suppose, that you're tasked with delivering. That was an enormous challenge to undertake. What was the appeal of soccer tots and Brazilian soccer schools in the UK? Because I remember there would have been, if I kind of put my thinking cap on, go back to 2005, a sort of degree of cynicism that you kind of bring samba-style to British football was still very, very, I suppose, introspectively focused. I would imagine at that time we were starting to get more foreign coaches, more foreign managers. It was starting to become more inclusive. It was starting to open up to some degree, but nowhere near what it is today. So what was the appeal of that particular responsibility for you?
Yeah, so I think to go back a few years before I started that, I'd progressed through the leisure centres and health clubs and done my kind of management training in that world. Had taken on running a couple of leisure centres, and actually I brought those franchises into a group of leisure centres that I was overseeing. So I was looking for a football product that would span across half a dozen leisure centres that I was looking at program development for, and I was looking for something that was innovative, what was new, what was something that just could compete with the traditional that was out there. Every leisure centre, a traditional football school, a traditional football camp, and I just wanted something that was different, that could be branded differently, that would stand out, that would just give us a point of difference as a leisure brand. And got connected with the Brazilian soccer schools, the Soccer Tots network, and we bought some franchises into the business. We operated them. We brought in some coaches to run those across, our locations, and I really bought into the brand.
Why? What was it? What was it about the brand that appealed to you?
I think it was the fact that for me, that balance of samba flair, there was a little bit more of a focus in the top division at that stage with some of the international players coming. It was still capped at that stage, so you could only have 3 international players, from outside the UK. So there was a lot of focus on those 2 or 3 that each team had. And I remember from a Man United perspective, Andrei Kanchelskis and some of those, real flair type players that were coming into the country, and that tapped into the branding that the Brazilian soccer schools had. The other element of it from a technical perspective, and I was a coach, was the background that Brazilian soccer schools had with what was called football de salon, which is now typically known as futsal. So the smaller weighted ball, which gives kids more touches, it therefore increases the technical growth of a child much better. So if you look at Ronaldinho, he didn't stop playing futsal or football de salon in Brazil until he was about 11. Pele, a lot of his work was done on these small five-a-side futsal, football de salon type courts. So the development I was really interested in, and that gave a nice point of difference. Now, there was always going to be the traditional football coaches that went, well, this isn't for us. This isn't football. This is five-a-side. And England's always had that very five-a-side is a indoor leisure centre, bouncing it off of a wall type, grown men kicking a ball around for an hour on a leisure centre. Whereas within Europe, within South America, football de salon is how you learn football. So I just bought into the branding element of it, the fact that it gave a point of difference, and technically it developed better players. It was the reason why the South African players were coming over to this country, and their technique was just a lot better. So that's how I got, bought into the brand. And then I was asked to come up from steering 3 or 4 franchises as part of this leisure network to go, can you help us now steer some of that business side globally? We've got this network and we'd like someone that can be an ambassador for that and grow that and help push that message out and train the franchisees and probably give a bit more of a business angle to what was already a very defined coaching brand.
And what sort of business development experience had you had at that point? I mean, accepting that running leisure centres is, you're running a sizable business of its own right. But talk to me a bit about your business expertise that gave you the confidence, I guess, and the skills to make a success of that responsibility to the extent you did.
Yeah, I think for me, managing leisure centres, managing big health clubs, the big rackets clubs that have got everything from swimming and tennis and big kids facilities and health and beauty areas, that multifaceted management role kind of gave me a really nice grounding to just look at business full stop, to understand the numbers, to understand revenue per square foot in certain areas, to understand how you give good customer service and how that equates to good retention rates and the finances that sit with that. So for me, business was in my head quite simple. You keep people happy and people stay. You create a good product with a good service, people will come. And that's no different whether you're driving a football business or you're driving a shop or a leisure centre. So I always felt quite comfortable with business and understanding the basics, the principles of it. And I think where the team at the Brazilian Soccer School Network were particularly keen to look at me was innovating around business and coming up with new ideas and new revenue streams and looking at things with a different pair of eyes. And having also bought into the franchise, I saw from an end user perspective what was working and what wasn't. So I gave a really nice perspective to future franchisees because I'd been in their shoes at some stage.
What do you think you learned from the experience?
Football for me is, I guess, the highs and lows I've hit with football. But I learned that working with different people in different countries is great for learning. I think there was an opportunity for me. I did a lot of traveling. I was launching soccer schools in Australia. I was helping them out in different countries, and I loved that. But I think I exited that business in a tough situation. I think for me, that probably overshadowed the fun that I had with it. For me, speaking to and working with lots of different people, training up, hundreds of coaches and helping them on their journey was probably the piece that I took away most from it. That there's a lot of people that were in that network that are friends for life from different countries that I helped them steer the starting points for their business. They bought into a brand, they bought into a vision, but ultimately that was what was paying their mortgage as well. They'd committed to a franchise, as a lot of people do, and there was an ownership on me and the team to make sure that what we gave them, the support, the guidance, the advice, was enough to help them drive a business that was successful enough to look after their family and pay the bills and so on and so forth. So for me, that was a proud moment to sit back and go, these people are having great success running their businesses and I've helped steer that.
How did you find the transition from, in effect, not quite technically, but in effect from franchisee to franchisor? What was that experience like from your perspective?
It was an interesting one because it gave me a completely different perspective that no one else in that head office team had. They'd very much looked at it from, this is what these guys need, let's deliver it. And I was coming at it going, that's not what they need, because I was one of those people. So looking at it from a different angle was really interesting. And that gave a really nice perspective when I was sat and speaking to these people, because I could relate to them on a level that, I'd been there. I'd coached the kids. I'd been trying to get school contracts. I'd been out there, in the midst of the winter, coaching camps, and it'd be freezing cold, and parents stood there and, wanting to know what was going on around, is my kid going to get better? Are they going to play for this team and that team? So that connectivity on that level with them, I think, really gave us a nice angle, and ultimately helped us grow the business, because we were looking at things and providing solutions before, they were being asked for.
So tell me, fast forward again to 2010, and you establish your own business, iKids.
Yeah.
I think, if I'm right if I've described it in the right way, iKids. Going right the way back to your childhood, you described those kind of entrepreneurial traits around comic books that you alluded to. But had you always had ambition or a vision that your own business would form part of working life for you? And if so, what was the inspiration, if you like? What was it that the starting point from which iKids was launched?
I think for me, I always knew I was entrepreneurial, but I didn't always know that I was right to run a business. And
despite the fact that you were running businesses for other people, even if you take it to the form of a leisure centre, clearly that is, as we said earlier, a sizable business in its own right.
Yeah, I guess I was running a business within a business in a lot of the worlds that I was in. But I guess to start off with, it was always the comfort that there was a big team of people there to support, because there was a marketing team, there was a finance team, there was an HR team, and so on. And I knew where I fitted. I knew the business areas that I could run and I could add value to. But I maybe hadn't had so much exposure to some of the other things that now I look back on and go, when you run a business, you do wear all the hats. You're finance person one day, you're HR person the next day. I probably hadn't looked at it in that respect. I think the trigger for me, and there was a couple of them. It was opportunistic. There was an opportunity for me. I was, just before I set up iKids, I was on the operating board of a sporter. We had 55 clubs, and I had a great role within them, but we were just selling out to Virgin Active. So there was an opportunity for me to do something different, and that was a trigger. And I think also just releasing some of the politics. If I was running my own business, I could take control of some of the politics. And I've had some great managers, and I've had some great experiences, and I've had some really poor ones. I was kicked out of football, pretty much for being gay, and that was a real kick in the teeth, because I'd worked through that for 15 years, and all of a sudden it's like, no, you can't be in this world. And the world that I really wanted to be in was one that was given, pretty much taken away. And for me, that ability to go, actually, I want to control my own destiny now. I don't want to be told what I can and can't do. I want to seize that and go, actually, I can go back into football if I want to, because I can control it. No one's telling me what I can and can't do. So I think it was a combination of, I was experienced enough at that point in time that I'd created a lot of contacts in the sector and the industry, and an ability just to go, I want to do it on my own now. The time was right. There was an opportunity to exit from a sporter before we sold out to Virgin, retain them as a client because they needed my support in the handover period. So that de-risked setting up my own business. So I think there was, those two elements really, that the opportunity was at that point in time, and also that underlying, I want to get back and do the things that I want to do without being told what I can and can't.
It's interesting. I think, your point around, put words into your mouth, but being kicked out of football for being gay. If you even here we are in what is virtually 2021, we're still in a situation where, unless my memory serves me incorrectly, there's yet to be a playing footballer, male footballer, to have come out. I think Thomas Hitzelsberger came out after he finished from Aston Villa. But and yet here we are in other sports where it's become, those barriers to a degree have been broken down. I think of somebody like Gareth, the rugby player, Thomas. It's gone from my mind. But Gareth Thomas. There have been other sports where people have rightly, and proudly stood up and come out. And I think, and yet here we are, as I say, in football, that has still yet to happen. And I wonder if those prejudices, even that strikes me as appalling to think that in the noughties, or even only 10 years ago, that degree of prejudice was still so strong. I suspect there's as a sport, certainly in the UK, I would sense perhaps arguably beyond, it still has a long way to go to break down those sorts of barriers.
Yeah, this was 15 years ago, and I wasn't a player. I was a coach, and I was in the administration side of football. And I was working with coaches, and I guess for me, I got to a period of time when I was working in football full time that I felt comfortable coming out. So I was 26, 27 at that stage, but that was probably the best decision for some elements of my life, and the worst decision because it was ultimately what kicked me out of a job that I absolutely loved. But I'd worked with a lot of coaches that were gay, that just knew that they would never come out. I'd met a lot of players that were in the same world that were like, I just can't do it. One player that I used to speak to, and he said, my agents told me not to. Told me not to. Because I'd lose my contract, all this type of fear factor. And that's really tough working in that world where there's a lot of amazing people that are just, not encouraged, not supported, and just feel like they can't.
And ultimately not able to be themselves, really be themselves.
Yeah, correct. So for me, being kicked out, and pretty much told, you can't have this job. If that's what you are. And I'd been with that company for, a couple of years before I felt the confidence to actually, say this is who I am. And it was just like, no, within 6 months I was gone.
How must that have made you feel at the time?
I didn't go back into football for 5 or 6 years. I completely ditched the industry. I went back into, call it my safety net, which was health clubs, leisure centres. And that is a world that's much more inclusive. Always was, and that was pre me, coming out, I guess. And I just avoided football. I avoided the thing that I probably loved the most in terms of, my working world. And I guess it makes you stronger because ultimately I fought back, and I was actually, I got my confidence back. I got my mojo back, I guess. Friends around me at that stage were very supportive. My family were very supportive. And, for me, it was a matter of time until I got back in. It needed to be the right opportunity, and when I set my business up back in 2010, one of the first clients I was able to secure was Challenger Sports. And they are still one of the largest soccer coaching companies in the world. But I felt, and this is probably on reflection, maybe it was the right thing to do, but when I met the senior team and I came on board to help them out with a particular project in 2013, they were asking, why did you leave? Why was this sudden leaving of football, and why have you not been involved for 5 or 6 years? And I felt comfortable enough to explain the situation. They were very supportive, and they were like, no, absolutely, this business is not going to treat you that way, and so on. So that gave me the confidence to kind of get back into that world. But it took 5 or 6 years, and I dug my head in the sand a little bit in the football world because of it.
It's interesting because I think if we reflect back on your earlier comments about childhood and thinking, much of that thinking was, well, I could do that, to then all of a sudden have someone actually, or an organisation, a body, an industry say, no, you can't. Actually, no, you can't. That must have been incredibly tough to have worked through. But to your point, the resilience and the bounce back ability that you've evidenced as a consequence, all credit you. Not that you need my endorsement, but nonetheless, I think it is interesting that I think that that consistent throughout the people I've met through this podcast, often through my working life, there's this real theme of there's an event that people have to bounce back from, often in with a real struggle, but actually they come flying out the traps when they really do. It must have been an incredibly proud day when you got Challenger on board as a client for iKids.
Yeah, for me, yes. I think that I switched off my whole life to move to Leeds and take on that role, and within 2 years it was gone. And it's like I couldn't control it. It was completely out of my control, and I had to almost restart my life, sell the house, move back down wherever I could find a job relatively quickly, which my safety net was back in leisure, and I was lucky enough to find something that was the right move. And that you just rebuild. But I think it's given me a lot of, when I set the business up, it's like, you can't treat people like that. There are people that need supporting in different ways. And that's a job of a leader. That's the job of someone who runs a business to be open to any person with any background, with any skill set. So the way that I try and run the businesses that I do it with a very different pair of eyes now because of, I guess, the prejudices that I had when I was working within someone's, independent business.
So tell me about iKids. So what is it that iKids was set up to do?
So in my last role within health clubs call it employed role within health clubs was head of retail for a sport. So we were 55 clubs and my division was racket, swimming, kids, fitness, randomly health and beauty, any of the almost ancillary services within a big health club. But my focus and my love really was still working within the kids sector. I went into that business originally as their families director. I was headhunted to come in and steer the ship for 55 families clubs, and what did that look like? And that role was restructured, and then I ended up taking on these other areas. So for me, what went from 5 days a week focusing on kids activities and family activities and enhancing the opportunities in these clubs for that world ended up being probably half my week was on it, because I was writing, personal training strategies, and I was sorting out rackets managers, and I was looking at swim timetables and group exercise programs and so on. So the opportunity when we sold out to Virgin Active was, actually, I'd like to go back to doing the bit that I came in to do originally, which was focusing on kids' activities and really professionalizing that sector. I remember when I was younger, back in that world, working in the children's department of any health club was seen as very much childcare, kind of, not very professional. It was always, and I was always, you're a boy, why are you working with kids in this world? And for me, I had this urge to really try and professionalize that sector. I always had done that. Back when I first started, my first job in kids was 1995. It was like, well, if you're not very good at school, you go and do childcare, you do an MVQ type program, and then you end up working in a creche or nursery. And it was very belittling to the people that worked in that sector, that ultimately are being given the prized possession of someone. The responsibility that you have to look after someone's child, whether that's in a childcare setting or a sporting setting, is second to none. And I've always said that. And for me, professionalizing that sector and helping to raise the profile of people that do work in that sector was a big passion of mine. I was delivering a training course a few years back with a friend of mine, and we were doing intros around the room. I was delivering a preschool football training course for staff in a health club. And we did the typical round the room introductions as to who's who. And this guy stood up and he said, I'm whatever my name is, and I just work in the kids sector. And I was like, you don't just work in the kids sector. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, you work in the kids division. Don't just do it. It was almost apologetic that, I just work in that part of the business. I said, no, you work in one of the most professional parts of the business. And I explained, who are you looking after? I'm looking after 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds. I said, how important are those kids to the parents that are giving you the responsibility to do it? Oh, absolutely. So you don't just work with kids. You do an amazing job working, empowering, engaging kids that are looking up to you as a role model. That is a professional job. And don't let anyone ever say differently. And that's something I try and advocate when I'm working with people that do, love and want to work in that sector.
No, absolutely. I mean, ultimately it's an obvious thing to say, but it's the future, it's the generations of tomorrow. They're going to shape the world and shape the environments in which we all find ourselves. So, to your point, I think that it ought not to be underestimated. I'd never quite thought of it in the way in which you described, actually, that there's that kind of almost that sense of sort of almost you're sort of babysitting. You're providing something for the kids to do whilst the parents are doing what they do. Actually, it is of itself a really, really important space in which to be engaged. So, no, all credit.
Yeah, it's sometimes seen as that secondary service. Well, actually, it's not really. It should be seen as the primary service, because without it, no one else can do anything with that. And that stepping stone that child has, and we've talked about this a lot within sports coaching, that you are the first experience that a child has in sport or physical activity. If they don't enjoy it, they will probably never go on and continue that active life. So you are giving them the first experience. That first experience has to be fun. At 4 or 5 years old, If they don't enjoy football because the coach is crap or the content that you're delivering isn't fun and engaging, that will be their forever moment that I didn't enjoy football or I didn't enjoy that particular sport. And I remember back to when I was a kid and, what was PE? PE was running around the field. I hated it. It wasn't engaging. And that experience you can't give to a child anymore. That they want to have fun. They want to be engaged in it because that might be the difference between them staying active or not as they progress through. That might be the reason why they do go on and be a professional sports person, because that first moment they loved and enjoyed and engaged with, and that coach they'll always remember. And I think that's really powerful.
So tell me, Challenger Sports. Now, am I right in thinking that you were tasked with the goal of turning Challenger from the largest soccer coaching company in America and Canada to the largest in the world? That's a significant undertaking, I think, not trying to underestimate it. So where do you even begin with a challenge of that magnitude?
I think it wasn't just me tasked with that. I was kind of fronting a division that was aiming to take what they did in America globally. So at their peak, they were delivering 3,500 camps across America. They were working with upwards of 1,000 coaches a year that were being recruited, trained and deployed. And the aim was actually to integrate elements of what I'd picked up with Brazilian soccer schools and the franchise network and try and have multiple challenger work environments in different countries. So we set up a small franchise entity in the UK. We invested heavily in it. We had some successes and we had some failures with it, ultimately. It was hard to replicate. The franchise world is tough. It was very competitive. And, for me, we got to a stage within 3 or 4 years that we'd kind of invested and we'd got to a break-even stage. And then the CEO, kind of said to me, look, you're impacting a $1 million part of our business. Actually, we think your skill sets were better suited now helping us with a $30 million business in the States. So we kind of put on hold some of the international growth to refocus on the US part of the business, which, was having its ups and downs purely because it was more competitive over in the States. There were all sorts of camp operators. There are so many more people competing in that world that they really wanted a different pair of eyes on the branding and the marketing element of it. So, did we ever achieve the global status that we hoped for? No. Did we achieve some great things? Yeah, we got some nice exposure. We launched some soccer schools in places like New Zealand and South Africa and Cyprus, across the UK. Did we ever achieve what we hoped we would? No, because I think the focus of the business shifted to go, we've got to get back to where we were in the States, because whilst we were growing outside of the US side of the business started to drop because of the amount of competitors and the external factors around visas of getting staff into the US and so on.
Am I right in thinking that, and I'm going to have to call it soccer for the basis of a US, as we're talking about US, much as that pains me. But am I right in thinking it's the biggest participant sport in the US up to the age of about 16? Before then, the likes of of American football and basketball really then start to overtake. Baseball start to overtake. But there's obviously from a kid's perspective, boys and girls, particularly girls. I mean, if you look at the success at an international level of the US women's soccer team, again, back to that word, but the hugely successful. So I guess the opportunity in the US is one that, to your point, they're going back to refocus on. It's a very evident opportunity, and there's a real growth opportunity to get the business back to where it should be.
Yeah, it was always a high participation sport, but it was a middle class sport, still is a middle class sport over in the States. So the basketballs of the world are like over here, football is a working class, sport. In the US, as it is in a couple of other countries, middle class sport. So the clubs are commercial beasts. The clubs over here, a recreation club over here doesn't have the money, the resources, the funds. It's scrabbling around for sponsorship and money here just to survive. Whereas in the States, they're commercial entities, and that has really driven the middle class structure of soccer. But yes, one of the highest participation sports for kids. Been helped a little bit by the risks of head injuries and concussions in American football and some of the other sports which are deemed more dangerous, and also the inclusivity of you just need a ball. Really, you haven't got to spend a fortune on pads and equipment and bits and pieces. You really just need a ball. So the World Cup, when they first had it, obviously spiked interest. The success of the women's game spiked participation. And that really helped. And Challenger, when they first set up, rode that wave. They set up in 1985 when soccer wasn't even a thing over in the States, and were able to ride that wave. But over the last kind of 5-10 years, more people have gone, actually, we can do this as well. And there's been more competition, and other sports have come in and started looking at the camps model and the club model, and it's just become a much more competitive space.
So what were some of the bigger challenges that Challenger presented you? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Challenger had a lot of multiple brands, a lot of different offerings, and sometimes, that could be quite confusing. So it was consolidating, what are we good at? What do we know? We are a camp operator at heart, and there was a teamwear business which, sold a million kits across the US and Canada every year. So it's go back to what were the foundations of the business to start off with. And one of the big values that the company had was it was putting the right people in the right place, delivering the right curriculums. So going back to continuing to develop the recruitment process, the training of the staff, to make sure that we had the best people delivering to the kids in these communities around the States. But also then around making sure that what they were delivering was the best content. So the curriculums that we were delivering were really the best that were out there. And then wrapping that up with, are we delivering it in the right way? Is it fun? Is it engaging? Are the kids enjoying what they're doing? So that was a big piece, was just go back to the foundations of the business. And, for me, Challengers are a phenomenal beast in terms of the number of people who have worked there, thousands of coaches over the years, millions of kids have gone through their programs. It was really just helping to give some steer on the brand identity and refocusing how we positioned it in what is a very competitive space now, with digital marketing, with competition for social media presence and so on. How do you get in front of those soccer mums and soccer dads and position something that before it was easy because they just saw a banner or a poster up locally and they went to the camp, where now there's so much more competition for their advertising eye.
How did that tap into, going right back to what we were talking about from the outset around that creative trait and talent that you evidenced from an early age, much of which I think you accredited to your mum and her creative expertise. But how much of that did that enable you to tap into that creative flair that, perhaps may not have been, you've had other opportunities to evidence it, but perhaps not to quite the same degree, quite the same reach as you might have done with Challenger? How did that work out?
Yeah, I think for me, the creativity was around ideas and concepts that would grab attention, and coming up with brands and sub-brands that stood out and marketing activities that were working. I think the integration of technology was one thing that stood out for me. How could we create a point of difference using technology? I was always an advocate within iKids and my world that if you harness technology for good, it can be positive for kids. There was this trail of thought, well, we need to decrease screen time for kids and so on. Well, you tell a kid not to do something, they will want to do it even more. So I'm a big advocate of encouraging kids to utilize technology if it's used positively. So I'd started working with a great technology startup called Topodium, and they have an app where kids can consume content like you could on YouTube, videos, little, drills and skills and so on and so forth. But rather than it stopping there like it does with YouTube, where you've got this kind of like, well, we hope you learnt it, we think you engaged with it. It had a 360 loop. The idea being that the kids would then upload a video of them completing whatever the skill is that they've learnt through this app, and then they would get virtual coaching with an actual person that would sit and watch the video and give them feedback on it, and it created this 360 loop. So for me, I looked at bringing that type of technology into Challenger as a way of going, what's the point of difference? How can we engage with these kids on camp that might only come on one camp a year? So we engage with them for 1 week, but then we don't see or hear from them for 51 weeks. How do we expect them to come back the following year if we've got no touch points during that point in time? So we utilize this technology to go, actually, we can see you before camp now because you can be practicing all these things through this interactive app before you come and join us. You can almost engage with some coaches before you have a physical touch point with us. And then, by the way, once you've finished and your camp's done and we've waved you off and you've had a great time and you've gone great and the coaches move on to another community, you can still be in contact with us through this network. So Topia was a client of mine with iKids. Challenger was a client with mine at iKids. I connected the dots on that, and that became a mechanism to help that creative thinking around doing something just a little bit differently.
Has technology been perhaps the biggest shift that you've seen in the whole world around health and fitness and and that whole leisure space, the integration with technology strikes me as, there's been some phenomenal advances. Has that been the biggest shift, do you think, in terms of how the industry is evolving?
I think that hybrid now of physical and digital is really where companies are seeing the success. And this year, particularly with COVID, they've had no choice but to pivot to that if they hadn't already. So for me, that ability to integrate technology into that world has been something that some companies were doing very successfully pre-COVID, and now everyone's jumped on board. And I think it's expedited the growth of that part of the sector 5 years, quicker than it probably would have done without, the changes to the world this year.
Which leads us nicely on to 2020. So the thing that struck me about your experience, Chris, and for many, I suspect, might draw similar conclusions as to, my first thought was, well, hey, this guy's crazy. He's launched a business in April 2020, at which point the rest of the world is sadly, shutting down at every turn, and obviously having to face huge challenges as a consequence. So Topodium, if I've said that correctly,
correct,
your business. So tell me about. So first and foremost, tell me about Topodium and what you've set Topodium up to deliver. To do, but then I want to wind back a little bit and understand how you got to that point where you thought, right, now my own business with Topodium, this is going to be the future.
So Topodium is at its roots a marketing, innovation and consultancy business specializing in health, sport, leisure industries. The starting point really was a marketing agency, which was what I'd built within Challenger. My role for the last 18 months within Challenger was really to steer a marketing team, to consolidate all the different marketing people within the different divisions of the business and create this one marketing division. And, this time last year, there was 14 people in that team, and my big focus was to make sure that we kept everything in-house. We could deliver everything that was needed, from paid search and social through to videography, through to web design and development, and we could control how we positioned our product and our brands. That's a big cost for an organization like Challenger. And a marketing team and all the things that we delivered was $800,000 a year cost to the business. And sometimes it's hard to justify how you're adding value when you're doing brand awareness and, some of the softer touches within marketing that you can't always put a return on investment to. So one of the ideas that I positioned to the team, crikey, a couple of years ago was, let's look at this team. This team's great. I'd spent a lot of time really working with the team, defining the roles, bringing in a couple of new people that gave us a real point of difference in that world. Let's now create an ability to outsource those skill sets outside of Challenger, so that we could almost create an agency within the Challenger business that could help offset this $800,000 worth of cost every year. And then the plan was in 5 years' time to almost get that marketing cost to Challenger down to net neutral. So turn and build almost like a mini agency within Challenger. Challenger, there was an opportunity for that business to be sold at the beginning part of the year. And again, an opportunity for me and the co-founder of Topodium, Taylor, a good friend of mine who'd worked on the tech side with Topia previously. We had an opportunity to, get more involved with the purchaser of Challenger or take on, a CEO type role within Challenger. We decided against it, and actually, very amicable with the Challenger team. We said, look, this dream that we had of creating this agency, we'd still like to do. And actually, we'd like to extend that and create an element of innovation and technology utilizing Taylor and his Topia background and bring that into one entity. We then retained Challenger as a client. It was very, Topia is also one of our clients. So very similar to how I exited Sporter back in the day and set up iKids, there was an opportunity to go, look, this mutually works. It brought the cost base down because I brought 8 of the team across with me, brought the cost base down for Challenger, which helped with their potential sales stroke investment. I was able to start the business with some guarantees of work with Challenger and Topia. And then COVID happened and the world was a bit different and the sale didn't go through. And we were caught in that period of time. Well, if we stay with Challenger, it's what's happened in that world. And if we don't leave, what happens? And so we went, sod it, well, let's go and do it and stick to the plan, build the business. And, back in March when we thought lockdown might be for 3 weeks and we're done by Easter or whatever it might be, we went full guns into building the business.
And I think there is an argument that says there's never the perfect time to do these things, right? So has the journey been what you imagined it was going to be?
Yes and no. I think, for me, when Taylor and I set the business up, it was like, what do we want to do? We want to have fun with this. We got to a stage where we'd learned a lot. We'd worked with a lot of businesses. We'd worked with businesses where there was a load of politics. We'd worked with businesses that probably steered you in a direction where you probably wanted to go in a different one. So for us, it was like, we believed in the team that we built, or the list of people that we were wanting to bring in at some stage. We believed in the sector. We loved the sector. Taylor's from sports tech, I'm from sport and leisure. And, we knew there was an opportunity to provide that holistic solution for people in the industry that wanted that one-stop shop, almost, that ability to work with an agency that didn't just understand their sector, but understood the intricacies of marketing and innovation within their sector as well. So for us, it's been what we expected in terms of building the business. I think the brand, what we wanted to achieve, we've probably had more time to do that because of lockdown and, a lack of business coming in, because effectively our sector's closed for 6 months. We launched the business from people's bedrooms on the 1st of April. And at that same time, leisure centres closed, health clubs closed, sports centres closed, sports coaching stopped, schools closed. So all the avenues where we would typically be picking up clients, they just didn't exist. So that gave us a lot more time to refocus, or just focus full stop, on the foundations, the internal processes, building the culture with the team, that maybe if we'd just been really busy from day one, some of those things sometimes get forgotten.
Interesting. So if you reflect back on the launch, is there anything that you would have done differently? And if so, what might that have been?
I don't think I would have done anything differently. We adapted to what was in front of us at that point in time. A lot of people said, well, on reflection, would you have stayed where you were and not launched, and launched when things settled down? Probably not. If I look at, unfortunately, what's happened to the sports coaching businesses in the States, they've not been able to run this year. So, if we'd stayed where we were, it would have been very hard to stay put. Challenges had to shrink in size, massively since that point in time. So, starting the business was the best thing ever. We've had great fun. It's been tough. We pulled the team in the first kind of month when we realized that lockdown was going to probably be a little bit longer than that initial 3-week period. And we went, look, we're still committed to this. We're still committed to you as the team. And we had, 9-10 of us at that point in time. But we're going into survival mode. We didn't think we would have to, clearly. But, we've got to survive 6 months, and we had a 6-month survival plan in place. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to achieve. We have to get through to the 1st of September. And this was at a time when marketing businesses across the country were closing, were falling down. And the sector was on its knees, pretty much. Didn't know when it could reopen, didn't know what was going to happen, what was going to be left when it opened. So, for us, it was survival. And we said, look, we just need to have enough money in the account on the 1st of September to try and see us through to the end of the year. That's our focus. And we pivoted, with what we did. We spent a lot of time listening to what was out there. We did a lot of free work just to build equity with businesses. We spent a lot of time building processes, listening to the team, getting the team really involved with what does good look like. If someone comes in and wants a website build, what's our most efficient way of building it? What process do we want to follow? So that survive phase was, tough, but our commitment was always to the team. We knew we would have to invest in a new business. Of course you do. So we just knew that we had to invest in a slightly different way for that first 6 months. And the focus with the team was get through survive, have our head above water when the world gets back to some form of normality, potentially September. That was the point in time that we originally put. I said, then we can drive, and we had this survive, drive, and then thrive kind of focus with the team. And I think that kept everyone coordinated around one goal.
And what is it that you think you have? What's the secret sauce, if you like, that has meant that you've been able to succeed on that through those very tough times to get to that point at which you're thrive, survive, survive, thrive, whichever way around that might be. But
survive, drive, thrive.
Thank you. That was the one I was looking for. You get to that point. What is it? What is the secret sauce?
I think the team has to be the team. We brought with us exceptional people from my Challenger world who have developed massively over the last 6 months. They've all learned things. I mean, from an apprentice that was 16 when we started the business, had his 17th birthday, whilst we were locked down, and is doing an amazing job with our social media management at the moment, through to, Ryan, who heads up our brand and marketing, and, just seeing him grow and develop and manage the team and so on. For me, that's where Taylor and I get the biggest kick, is seeing the development of the people within the team. And I think that's almost herd mentality, that we've stuck together. We act as one. We enjoy working with each other, and we love the sector that we're working in. I think that's been the biggest piece for me over the last kind of 9-10 months.
So what does success mean to you?
Having fun, outputs for people. I guess it sounds a bit twee that we want to improve things for people. Our mission is very much transforming journeys and inspiring possibilities. That's the 4 words that is our mission statement. And whether that's the journey of a business and taking them from A to B, whether that's the journey of a member of staff, helping them develop in a way that they didn't think they could develop, and giving them exposure and experience in a world where maybe they wouldn't normally get that. That's what success looks like for me. Is it all about the money? No, not really. But do we want to make sure that we can grow and afford to pay the team more each year? Absolutely. So yeah, for me, it's about outcomes for our partners. It's around giving them success. It's about taking them to places they didn't even think was possible in relation to what we can achieve with them. And for me, that just constant enjoying what I do, and Taylor and I set out to achieve that when we built the business. It was, forget the politics that can exist somewhere else. We don't want to work in that world where there are this political battles and, shareholders here and split priorities there. We know what we want to do. We know what we're good at. We know our sweet spot, and we just want to have fun doing it.
So how do you celebrate success?
At the moment, it's tough because, we can't be with the team. For me, celebrating success is the little wins that we have. I produce a little team update every week where a section of that is our weekly wins. And that could be achieving something great for a client. That could be the success of someone on the team. That could be bringing in a new client or partner. So, we try and celebrate that with the team. We have a coordinated call every Friday. It's a little mentoring call, but it's a time for us to impart some knowledge and some advice on the rest of the team. So those little wins, I think, are where we're at the moment. And then in time, it would be great to get everyone together. I mean, we've got, a team in South Africa, we've got a team in Denver, Colorado, we've got our team based here in the UK. At some stage, it'd be nice to get them all in the same room. That's not possible at the moment, but that's the point that I look forward to is at some stage having that away day type approach where we can fly everyone into one place and we can just spend time together as a team.
See, that fascinates me. If I think of how, from a leadership or management perspective, how the impact of COVID has meant that so many have had to evolve how they manage and get the best for and with their people. I think that kind of management, very visual form of management, walking a floor, being in the room, however you want to define it, we're now doing that kind of electronically, which is interesting that if you've got that experience of managing multiple locations where you've got that physical distance between you, that creates challenges. How do you think that's impacted your management style, bearing in mind, as you say, South Africa, Denver, Colorado, UK? That in itself is a stretch. How have you managed that?
Yeah, I think it's a real tough one to read the room virtually, to gauge, how people are really feeling on a call. And I think that comes down to just driving a culture that people know and understand that there's a safe space so that they can talk up and they can express their feelings. And I think that was hard to start off with because, we've got a pretty young team, and, that trying to instill that culture that I think we talked about it earlier, that fear of getting something wrong or that fear of having an opinion that might not be shared by someone else, forget that. There isn't a bad comment. There isn't a silly comment. If you've got a question, you've got a question, and we need to make sure you've got an answer. So I think, regular calls, we probably did too many calls to start off with. I think there was this, oh, crikey, we can't see anyone. We've got to have a call every day, and I think you overkill it to start off with, and then we've eased back, and then we speak, once or twice a week as a big group, and, we section off a little bit. But for me, that regularity of just having that FaceTime, I miss, because that's when I think some of the best work is done. And we work in a creative world. There's only so much creative collaboration you can do via a Zoom or a Google Hangout. But we've adapted, everyone has. But yeah, for me, the focus of getting everyone together and that collaborative work is going to be key to us moving forwards.
So what does 2021 look like for Topodium?
What does 2021 look like for anyone? For us, continuing to drive forwards, to have fun doing what we're doing, to build up the number of partners that we work with, continue to develop the team, to learn. And ultimately, we've set a target of working with X number of partners next year and delivering some great outcomes for them. So I think that's what success looks like. What we're thrown to stand in our way is I guess that's part of the adventure.
Absolutely. So tell me, what about outside of work? How do you relax? Do you relax?
I do. My dog is my big switch off. He's been the lifesaver, I think, during lockdown. But also, for me, I've always had a very good ability to switch off of an evening. I get up early. I'm up at 6. So I, sometimes we'll train first thing, but then I work from 7 through to 6, 7. I take a decent break at lunchtime, and I enjoy that. But in the evenings, it's once the dog's walked, there is no work. The emails don't go on. I don't check, anything. And that switch off is key. For me, I play tennis still a little bit. I was playing football up until pre-COVID, still badly, but I run around a lot, and I train. I still enjoy exercise and go to the gym and do classes and keep active. And pre-COVID, spending time with friends and family is a big part of my life, and that's probably the bit that I've missed this year, is that ability to just go and spend time with my goddaughter or my godson and family and so on. So I think at heart I'm an introvert in an extrovert world. I keep myself to myself. I'm quite happy with my own company, but I do need that focus of just being with people a few times a week and just being social with friends and family. But yeah, tennis, sport. I watch a lot of sport. Still a big Man United fan. We've had a few ups and downs, but that's how I keep switched off.
And are you a reader? What books do you read?
I'm not a reader. No, I should read. I think I should read more. Everyone tells me, "Oh, you should read more." I listen a lot, so I will listen to podcasts and radio shows and so on. That's just the way I absorb, I think, information. I'll listen to a lot of webinars and seminars online and stuff like that. So I think that's pretty much how I consume content as opposed to reading. For me, if I do read, on the odd occasion, it would be a sports autobiography, or it would be a business autobiography of some description. But yeah, not a big reader.
So what advice would you give to 21-year-old Chris Sharman?
Just do you. Be you. I think one of the things I struggled with in my 20s was trying to be someone that another person wanted me to be, adapting to be that person that someone else wanted, or I thought they wanted. Whereas as I set up my own business, it was, I'm just doing me now. This is who I am. I'm comfortable with that. It's not just the sexuality thing. That is, in business, I have a way. I connect dots. For me, selling is social selling. It's not about, do you want this product, and it's all transactional. It's much more relationship building. So for me, yeah, just do you. Be who you think is the best person to be, as opposed to adapting and molding for maybe where someone else wants you to fit into their world.
And do you think that's advice that you would extend to anyone out there who's who has a dream, who wants to break out on their own, wants to set up their own business? What advice would you impart them, do you think?
Yeah, I think I was lucky that there was opportunities to start a business at certain points in time, from iKids and then even Topodium. There were opportunities that gave me that, not comfort, but gave me an opportunity to go, now's an opportunity. If you don't take it, you might not get another one for another few years. So I think opportunistically look at where there is a point in time and then go for it. If I hadn't have made that decision back in 2010 when we were exiting a sporter to go to Virgin and go, now's the time, I ummed for, that was probably the biggest decision of my life at that point, business-wise, because it was like, well, I had a great salary. I was very comfortable. I could have transitioned across to Virgin Active. And, it was like, if I don't do it now, there might not be another opportunity. So I think the advice for someone is, if there's an opportunity, take it, because you never know when that next opportunity is going to come. And don't be scared, because if you take it and it falls down, at least you took it. You know, for me, look back and go, I'm pleased I took it and it went wrong, as opposed to, I wish I had taken it and seen where it had gone.
No regrets.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what does the future look like for Chris Sharman?
Continuing to have fun, enjoy what I do. I'm very passionate about this sector and the world that I'm in. And yeah, I think for me, keeping active, being healthy, touch wood, and next year getting back to being with friends and family a bit more than this year. But business-wise, continuing to grow. We've got some great plans in place for the next 3 to 5 years of expansion into a couple of other countries, but really just at the moment nailing down what we do, and getting more exposure to who we are and the awareness of the Topodium brand.
I think my observation might be around what COVID has done for us. If we tried to take some form of positivity from what has clearly been an awful set of circumstances, but that we have become very much more aware of our health and our well-being, and what makes us healthy and what doesn't. And I think if you looked through that first lockdown, you had the sort of proliferation of home workouts and home exercise. Gym kit sales went through the roof. People out walking, people out riding bikes. You just saw that. Admittedly, it was through that first lockdown, through the summer months, made it perhaps a little easier than the more recent lockdowns. But my sense is that people have acknowledged to a wide extent that need to look after ourselves and to be active and to maintain fitness. But also, I think what people have missed, to your point, is that we are by nature social creatures. And that social interaction that we've all missed, that ability, whether that, it doesn't have to be in huge groups, it just close ones, family, friends. My sense is that the sectors in which you operate will come flying out the traps when the opportunity presents. It literally is that pent up demand. The world desperately wants to get back to, exercise classes and seeing friends and grabbing a coffee afterwards and all those sorts of things that were just what we did. I think people are going to really appreciate them to a great degree. So I think huge opportunity. And I've no doubt that Topodium will go from strength to strength as a consequence. Chris, it's been great to share this time with you this morning. I really appreciate your insight. It's a fabulous journey, some really interesting times through which you've been, really interesting times ahead. And I think inspiring possibilities is a phrase that absolutely springs to mind as a consequence. So thanks for your time this morning. It's been great to meet you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Chris Sharman, thanks very much. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to today's Extrology podcast. I really appreciate your audience and ears. If you've enjoyed it, then why not hop onto iTunes and give us a review? I'd really appreciate anything that you might have to say. Any feedback, always gratefully received. And look forward to hosting you next time. See you soon. Just a reminder, today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners. Visit www.progressotalent.com today for more information.